Look at us. Huh? We're back in the studio. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam McKewon with the Pick Six Podcast, along with Evan Bland and Jimmy Watkins.
I don't know any different.
That's right.
This is all I know.
In week 2 of Jimmy's stint here at the World-Herald, and we are back at the desk, right? We're here, and we're talking to you, and we're happy to be here. It is, what is today? August 12th? I've lost time. My mind has touched the void. It's like I went to a bad restaurant, and I don't know what's happened. But is it August 12th?
Yeah.
It's August 12th.
Yeah, it is.
How you doing? That was
Doing
an Evan
well.
Bland, yeah, right there.
Yeah.
You just
yeah.
slid it in.
Slid it right. I mean, we're back.
We are back.
Yeah, this is my first time back here, since winter of 2019, early
Really?
2020. I was in here one time to get some credentials for the College World Series. Otherwise, it's my first time back in our venerable offices in downtown Omaha. So,
Did the door creak when you came in?
we've changed floors since then.
We have.
It's a lot different, but in some ways, it's the same. Sitting next to you, we got Jimmy over there riding shotgun. It's going to be a good time.
Yeah. Did anybody ever call you Dynamite when you were walking, growing up?
Why?
Because, of the it just fits well with Jimmy Dynamite Watkins.
No.
Okay.
If you want to try to make that a thing, we can try. But
No.
okay.
I was just curious
Okay.
if somebody had
I
done
thought
that.
I was worried this was like a movie reference I wasn't getting. Or
No.
something. Okay.
He'll
no,
drop those
I don't
too.
think so. No, the guy that won the NBA dunk contest that one time, I think his name was Jimmy Walker, but I think it was Kenny Walker. It was Kenny Skywalker.
Yeah.
That's right.
Jimmy Watkins, by the way, is a great newspaper name.
It's a great football
Jimmy
name,
Watkins. Yeah,
too. Quarterback name.
that's true. Very versatile.
Oh, yeah. You could easily have a quarterback playing name.
We are ascribing all sorts of value to a bunch of things I've never done before.
If you think about it, maybe not a quarterback right at this moment,
Okay.
but like you would have been, 1987 wishbone quarterback for K-State or something. You complete about 37% of your passes.
You're the
Run
young,
which is about
upstart
17
backup.
passes.
Yeah,
You're not the starter, but you're the young upstart who
That's
everyone's
right.
clamoring for. Bring in Jimmy.
that's right.
We
Control
haven't
the
seen
ball
him
deep.
yet. Yeah.
37 yards, has a 37-yard arm. Evan has the name of like a bank executive. You did not know this, but Evan, foregone untold riches as a bank executive to be here with us.
Well, all I knew growing up was I could never be a chef. That was just, nobody wants Chef Bland. So that limited my career path just a little bit. Didn't
That's a
happen.
good point.
I would
Yeah.
say you're overcoming the odds by entering a creative field with that kind of name.
You would have renamed yourself Evan Spice, though. And Evan has the most eclectic food taste. Ironically, he has the most eclectic food taste of all three of us, I think.
There's something to be sorted out in therapy about that. Has
He's
this been
very-
hanging over your head your entire life?
See, with your predecessor, Chris, it bothered him when I would try something different or outside the box.
Which
I think
he did all the time.
I think he was threatened
He was.
by just my curious palate
Yeah.
and to try something different.
Curious in a lot of ways.
So, anyway.
That's just sort of the blend that we have. What's interesting is that we retained the demographically interesting ages in this particular podcast. I am the cynical, what do you call it, late Gen Xer. I think I'm 43. How old am I? 43?
I don't know.
I'm 43. Oh, my. You're the millennial.
Yep. 35.
High millennial, like just sweet spot in millennial.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Barrel contact. Yep.
And I don't know what your generation is,
I'm
but
like
you're
the
younger
last-
than him.
I'm the last of the millennials. I hit that, I think, by like
Wow.
a year. I have a year to breathe. on
But I
that,
think there's quite a bit of
there's some
difference
overlap.
between
Yeah.
Sure.
a wheelhouse millennial here who's batting second in the order, and one that's batting sixth.
A utility type millennial. Yeah.
That's right. So you just have different experiences. Like you were a toddling child when 9/11 happened. We're gonna have the 20th anniversary of that very soon. So your memory of that was
in
probably
the Nebraska news this week.
Yep.
In the Nebraska news
That
this
it was.
week.
I'm going to have you describe what happened with the uniforms because I do want to talk about that. But there's just 3 different generations here. So I think
Right.
there's 3 different perspectives, and you're also not from here. And you didn't go to Nebraska, and so you're going to have a little bit different spin and perspective on a lot of different things, including basketball. All right, let's talk football. We're at that moment, and let's talk about it. Nebraska's halfway through its camp. We've talked to, I think, every position coach now. As of yesterday, Held and Verduzco, I think, were the last two. We've talked to Frost a couple of times. Not terribly enlightening there. He was pretty enlightening in Indianapolis. I think the last two he's been kind of preoccupied,
Sure.
which is okay. I would be too. But I think the assistant coaches have been pretty forthcoming and pretty interesting. We talked to almost all the major principals on the team. There's been a few that we haven't talked to, but we've talked to some young guys, some new guys. What, if anything, have you feel like what stands out 2 weeks into camp, either as a positive or a negative?
Well, I mean, it's been such a unique year to me because there hasn't been as many unknowns, defensively for sure. And I thought that was a theme this week was, okay, we kind of know who the starters are. They've got 9 guys back. Everyone knows what those guys bring to the table. But what about the guys behind them? And so getting the chance to talk to guys like Quentin Newsome, who may be the starter at corner this year. Getting to talk to, Chris Kolarvik, who's kind of new to the team, and just kind of seeing where some of these other guys, DeAndre Thomas, who came back after he was hurt last year, guys we haven't either talked to in a while or seen play in a while. That was fascinating to me. Is like we do talk about the ceiling of this defense, and I think it's got to go beyond those starters. They talk about Eric Chenander talked about JoJo Doman. He barely came off the field last year, and he said it's got to be different this year.
Really?
We got to ease back on that workload a little bit,
all right.
because you can't miss
What
2
are they bringing
snaps
him
a
off
game.
the field to do? Stand over there while who goes in?
Well, rest a little bit. Isaac
Caleb
Gifford,
Tanner.
he mentioned Javen Wright.
yeah,
Those would be a
Maybe.
couple guys, but
maybe.
the defense
Little Tanner,
fascinates me. Like,
Darius Payne combo. Yeah, I'd like that. Pass rushing.
so I don't know. I kind of like the nuanced unknown with the defense. You got to kind of go a little bit deeper. The offense is so much more obvious in terms of who's going to be the running back. What's the wide receiver
Big questions,
rotation
yeah.
look like? But if this team is going to rely on the defense in a way that it hasn't been able to, what does that look like? That's been something interesting to me.
It has.
I think the point that you made about the defensive depth speaks more to the defensive floor than it does the ceiling. If something goes wrong, who are these guys who are filling in? How comfortable are you with them? That seems like they have a pretty good grasp on what their second and third guys down the line look like. That's super important,
Right.
for a season that's going to be, they went through a lot with COVID last year. Now they've had a long off season. It's going to be a longer season this year. So that I think it's the defensive depth is more helpful to the floor of the defense than it is the ceiling.
If there are certain positions on this team where if too many guys get hurt, a trap door is going to open, and the position kind of goes like it's
Right.
over, like they're in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Incidentally, I don't think it's running back. I mean, I don't know how good they're going to be there, but I think the floor is pretty high
Right.
because they have so many of them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Lord knows, you got 6 of them. Somebody in there ought to be healthy. It was unbelievable to me last year that they couldn't consistently put more guys out there other than Wandale, but they weren't. I think the receiver room is relatively deep. Again, I think it decreases in degree of explosiveness when you start saying, because this guy's out, we got to put Lever, Falk, and Martin on the field all together at the
Sure.
same time. I think Martin's fairly explosive, but I think the other 2 guys are, sturdy, 11-yard hook kind of guys.
Mm.
The position that feels like a trap door on defense is inside linebacker.
Sure. 3-man rotation.
Mm-hmm. Well, and they
4 maybe.
had a Garrett
Snodgrass.
Snodgrass, which I
Yeah.
think was interesting, but Henrich has been a little bit dinged up. Reimer has a history of that. He's been hurt. Like he got hurt early in his true freshman year before
Mhm.
the season started.
Right.
And then he got banged up again. He's had to put on some weight. Kolarvik doesn't have that history. Well, maybe he does. Maybe he got dinged up at Northern Iowa too. And then safety, where, Deontay Williams and Markel Dismuke are, if they can stay healthy, great. I think Dismuke has shown that he can play through just about anything. Deontay Williams plays in a way that's a little reckless. I don't mean that in a bad way. He puts his body on the line a lot. And, he missed the whole season because of it. Now, behind him is
Right.
a Miles Farmer, who I think is a pretty solid player.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Noah Gates.
Gates. And we don't know anything about him. We as a player, we know very little. I mean, he's been on special teams some, but those are the positions I think are a trap door. And then you got tight end.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly
this
right.
week, Austin Allen and Travis Vokalek weren't at practice on Wednesday. We'll hear from Frost on Friday. We're recording this on a Thursday. Hopefully we hear a greater update. But as it stands right now, it's Chris Hickman, James Carney,
True
Goodwin.
freshman. Yep.
I think the walk-on is in there. And then Rollins. And Adrian Rollins looks like an incredible prospect.
Mhm.
But I think that's a journey there. That's going to take some time.
I think most Division I tight ends are just impressive looking, though.
They
You know?
are.
We'll see what happens if one of those impressive looking guys has to show some skills and they're not used to being in that spot.
They are. You know, AJ is a player that I think is going to take some time to develop. He was a really good basketball player in high school and more of a project, I think everybody would say.
Right.
He was sort of vacillating between an outside pass rusher and a tight end. That may still be a journey. But Hickman, so the story with Hickman, Jimmy, is that he kind of was a tight end in high school, and he was a better player than people thought. He kind of got underrated because he played with Nick Henrich, and he didn't make as many catches as, say, maybe some other players would, but he's a good blocker, and he played hard, but he was skinny. He came to Nebraska. They bulked him up a little, right? He played right away in 2019. He was in that little 4-game redshirt thing. Had a nice role against Purdue. Then they moved him to receiver, mostly because they needed more receivers, I think.
Right.
And they may have moved him because they felt like they were certain they were going to get Fedoni because Fedoni committed in August of last year, somewhere in there, and I think Hickman moved in during training camp or something like that. So they move him to receiver. They never used him there. And now they've moved him back because they feel like now they have enough receivers.
Right.
So he went up in weight, then down in weight. Now he's back up. Now he's about halfway back up the weight and has to go all the way, and he was the first-team guy on Wednesday. And I like Chris Hickman, but that's a lot to ask of a guy.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, he's been back and forth. I think he has 2 career catches for 0 yards.
Yeah.
He got a -1 yard pass against Maryland 2 years ago.
And he had one in Prince Purdue, I thought.
Yeah, maybe for 1 yard, I guess it would have been, right? So, yeah, I agree. That tight
That
end
was
is
the
the
day
one
they
that,
threw the ball sideways against a Purdue defense that couldn't stop the run.
right.
That was good.
So I agree. Like that position totally changes. And incidentally, tight end is one of their better top-heavy positions. I mean, those 2 guys are getting NFL looks. We saw the scouts at the open practice earlier this week, looking at Austin Allen, Travis Vokalek. But yeah, both of those guys are not there. That changes a lot about what Nebraska wants to do in the passing game, in the blocking game. I mean, that will directly affect their game plans here moving forward if those guys are out for an extended time.
I'll talk about what it changes, but Jimmy, if you have any additional thoughts.
I think we need to we're diving a lot into what it looks like if the big guys are not going to be there.
Right.
I just think we need more information. That's not a great take for the podcast, but
No, we
that's
do.
where I am. That's
Sure.
where I am in most areas of my life right
Yep.
now. I need
Yeah.
more information on where I'm going to be living. I need more information on the beat that I'm covering. I need more information on these tight ends. That's where
Yeah.
I'm at.
Yeah. So here's the reality that oftentimes players get hurt or they're banged up in practice, but there is a value in having 2 of them on the field at the same time. My sense is that Allen is better, is healthier in this circumstance, and may have just been held out for precaution or whatever. The reason that 2 of them are valuable is it alters the nature of what the defense wants to do. And so a lot of times in the game against Rutgers, they had 2 tight ends on the field at the same time. Both of those guys can catch the ball. They're both reasonable pass catchers. But they both function, especially Vokalek, as an additional offensive lineman. And when you're playing a smaller team, and Illinois will be smaller, Michigan State, Purdue, definitely. When you're
Northwestern,
playing a smaller team and you put 2 tight ends on the field, chances are good that a defense is not going to have 2 guys that they can throw out there that are physically able to battle with that kind of formation and also simultaneously cover those players. So if you have 2 elite tight ends on your team, and we don't see it that often, Iowa has that, Wisconsin has had that, Michigan's had that, it's a pain in the ass because you have to match the personnel and then you have to decide what you want to do. Do you want to put big dudes on the field? to match up against these big dudes, and then risks the possibility that, you know, a 240-pound linebacker can't cover the guy. Or, and this is what Rutgers did, they put little guys on the field and tried to run under the blocks. Well, we saw what happened as that game went on. Rutgers could not handle it. They were putting, you know, slot corners,
Yeah.
and 214-pound nickel backs, or, you know, super backs or whatever, and they couldn't handle it. Nebraska's most dangerous, if you're talking about running, kind of going to a power spread, Nebraska was the most dangerous in some ways when they had both of them on the field. Because you could still have two wide receivers, and you could still have a running back and a quarterback, and it left everything for you to run. The minute you put that third receiver on the field, you put a slot, you put a tight end, you're a little bit more conventional, and the defense is able to say, oh, we're just going to keep our little guy out there. Well, we'll keep our little guy out there, and he'll cover, and your slot receiver probably isn't your best player, so we're not worried about it. We'll cover him with a linebacker or a little guy. When you put two elite tight ends on the field, it's like when they had Fenton Hawkinson.
I was just going to say Iowa does that really well.
Ohio State couldn't cover. They could not cover them both. And this was Ohio State. And Ferentz's kid, who's older than me, is their OC. And he didn't always take advantage of the fact that they had both of them on the field, because they actually only played Fant like 50% of the time. But when they were on the field at the same time, it was like, oh, my God, what do you do?
Right.
What do you do? Because they can both block. And so Nebraska has consistently struggled with facing the Iowa that's able to run and throw out of those formations. Nebraska's actually been pretty good offensively with those two guys on the field. Not very explosive, but good. So if you lose one of them, in some sense, you may, it isn't guaranteed, but you may lose some of the functionality you had with your two tight set, because your third tight end is not Vokalink or is not Al. Those two guys are a little bit apart. And even Fedoni, I think, would have struggled in that sort of physical, burly.
This year, sure.
He's
yeah.
an adjuster. I mean, he's a guy that's in between the line and the receiver. So that's kind of the issue at that place. But we'll find out more. We will. We'll know a lot more from Scott Frost tomorrow. What else, Jimmy? What else stood out to you in the first 2 weeks of covering it?
Well, I think
Covering Nebraska football practice, being at practice, seeing all the people there, sweating in the sauna that they've placed us in North Stadium this week. It was about 94 degrees over there.
something that we kind of just touched on a couple minutes ago, the depth, I'm going to use air quotes, depth that Nebraska has at running back and wide receiver. Is it depth, or is it just a lot of different bodies who could, in theory, do the job? They don't have depth in the sense that they have a lot of guys who have produced at those spots before. So while, sure, there are a number of names that could be rotated in and out of those slots, I wonder for what purpose, though? Like, do they have all these bodies because, wow, we just have an embarrassment of riches? Or do they have all these bodies because, well, we might need to be shuffling different guys in and out as guys learn playbooks or are not living up to expectations, that sort of thing? I have questions about that. We can call it depth. We can call it an island of misfit toys.
Yeah, no, so yes, there's no question that they don't have, at least at running back, this is me talking off the top of my head. This is my opinion. My sense is they dedicate more scholarships to running backs than most programs do. That's just my hunch. And so, like the comparison you made of the floor and the ceiling, I think the floor of that group is actually kind of high because they're all scholarship running backs. And Yant has become one, but they all kind of come to the table with, these are guys who got offers from schools. They're not the fourth guy isn't the guy that you went up and got from Osceola High School, or I don't even know if Osceola High School exists, but you know what I mean. Tri-Center, whatever. The fourth guy is Marvin Scott, who is really good, or in high school. Right. So I think in that sense they have some. The receiver, I agree with you. The receiver was a mess last year, and at the end of the day, we don't really know. Like we hear Manning's going to be good. We hear Betts is coming along. We see the three freshmen. I was impressed with those three guys. Their
physically,
size.
yeah, physically for sure.
So the presumption is, at running back, there was a moment in 2019 where Tompkins was out with a knee. Ramir Johnson
was hurt.
He still had a piece of your heart, but he was hurt or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Dedrick Mills hurt his, ankle or butt or something. I don't know. He had a tailbone injury, I thought, at some point. And Maurice was removed. And it was Wandale Robinson.
Yep.
Just getting the crap beat out of him. Just getting hammered because they had literally no one else. Because one guy was out, one guy was a disciplinary issue. So it was that was kind of an island of. I think this group is maybe not as dynamic as Maurice Washington was, but.
I mean, I think I agree. It's just like, you look at last year, and when Mills was out, they still didn't have anybody who took over the job. I mean, they rotated in Vermeer and Marvin Scott.
Sevian was sick.
Sevian didn't get
hurt.
any looks.
Scott was,
So
Amir Johnson was not there.
So, they've added the new faces. You mentioned Yant. Stepp is in the room now. Gabe Irvin's in the room. So, and maybe not coincidentally, those are the guys who spoke with us in the media this week, and it feels like those three are certainly among the top four that Ryan Held alluded to. I think what's going to be interesting is, like, when I look at the room, I see guys with different skill sets. It feels like Gabe Irvin can do a little bit of everything. Stepp is kind of that downhill bowling ball kind of guy. Morrison's more of the slasher, kind of quick burst through the middle type. And so, you kind of take that and compare it to what Scott Frost said, where they want a feature back. I just don't know if this room is set up to have a feature back just because their skill sets are so different. It feels to me like they can use each of those guys situationally, spread out the carries, and maybe be more effective even if they do want that feature guy.
Who would you guys say feels the closest to a feature back in that room?
Immediately or long term?
I mean, Scott Frost says they're gonna have one this year, so.
Yeah, that's a good thing to say. That's a great thing to be able to say. Not sure he had that a ton at Oregon. He did when it was Freeman. Well, Michael James sort of was, but they also were running the other guys a lot. Long term, I think Gabe Irvin has probably the most ability. I think he's a hit as a recruit. I think there's been some others who are misses. He seems like a hit. I think short term, Stepp can do all the things you want him to do. He can pass block. He's smart. That's obvious. He was very sharp yesterday. He knows the game and those other things, and he was a high level recruit. And then, hey, Morrison's a really interesting player.
That's who I thought of.
As a runner, if you watch him back in high school, two things jump out. One, he's really good at pulling away from people. Two, he bounces a lot of runs. And so when you bounce a lot of runs, what you're doing is, I'm so fast and athletic, I can just kind of run around everybody. And that's the easiest way to gain a bunch of yards. When you get to college, it doesn't happen very often. And so all of a sudden, that bounce thing that you thought you were going to do, you can't do anymore. And so you have to turn it upfield and crash into defenders. So,
unless, of course, he's Reggie Bush.
Well, he's not. No, he's not.
Right, obviously, that's my point.
He's not, and beyond that, like Sevian was, Maurice was. Maurice was that good.
He was.
He was that athletically gifted that he could actually do it. Now, he was real light, too. He wasn't compact. He was 6'1", about 180, 170. I don't know. So he was actually good enough to do that. But a lot of players aren't, and I don't think Morrison's that guy. What encouraged me is he was thick. He was puffed up a little bit up top. Looked like he'd gained good weight. So I think he's going to be interesting. And then Irvin, he's a big guy. I mean, he's just a big guy. And if that guy can run fast, then you're going to like the big guy. We'll see. They got all big. A lot of them are big. They're going to bigger backs. And this kid they're bringing in the 2022 class is not. He's more of a, but he can play, man. You watch his high school tape, that kid can play.
Well, you know who else might get some carries is Will Nixon.
He might.
Out of the backfield. He's kind of that holdover Duck R type who can do a little bit of what Wandale.
Alante Brown can do it too, but yeah, I think you're right. I think Nixon might be more of that. I'm big on the 2022 guy. He can play.
Yeah.
Breaks a lot of tackles. Really interesting player. Reminds me a little bit of Amir. All right, let's go on to some buy and sells. So you've made a list of buys and sells.
We've hit on some of these topics already, but let's get into it more. From
Evan is leaning back on his banking background with this segment right here.
Wouldn't you get a loan from this guy?
maybe throw a tie on him. But yeah,
Yeah,
Low-
well,
low
yeah,
APR
I'm-
loan?
I'm a little dressed down
I
to
don't
give
even
out
know
a
what
loan
I
today.
don't even know what that means. A low APR loan. This isn't even real, is it? APR is credit card.
We're just buying or selling. We don't need a loan for this. I think you can afford it to buy it just with what you have. So the first one, let's stick with the
We're at
running
swap
backs.
meet right now.
Let's stick with the running backs because we're talking about this committee versus feature back idea. Buy sell the idea that Nebraska will have a back who gets 60% of the running back carries this year.
Oh, I like the way you phrase that. Go ahead, Jimmy.
I'm selling for all the reasons that we just talked about. It's a lot of new faces in the room. It's a lot of guys who can do different things. The person who I thought of as being the bell cow back in this offense is still Adrian Martinez to me, because when Scott Frost, as much as he said, we want to run him less, he has then also followed that up with, but if it's sometimes the best way our offense operates, and when your back's against the wall, you're going to fall back on what's comfortable and what works, and that's Adrian Martinez, keeping the ball.
Which means that the backs are just sort of rotational, and it's whoever's standing
Window
next to them.
dressing, yeah. So I'll sell that one.
I'll sell it too. I mean, I just, not because I don't trust any of the players. I just think it's going to be a year. So, you might have a guy that gets 60% of the running back yards. That could happen. It could be a big play guy in there, but I'll sell it. I'm going to say there's a sharing of the load that's more 50-50. Or 50-30, whatever's left among other
This
players.
could also be a sell for a positive reason. I think we would all agree that Marquis Stepp is going to be the guy who stands next to Adrian Martinez on the first snap against
He's
Illinois.
healthy, yeah.
Yes.
I think there's a good chance of
Yeah.
that. Sure.
But if Gabe Ervin keeps developing at the rate it seems like coaches have been talking about, well, they're gonna want to put him on the field and reward him for the stuff that he's been showing in practice. So
Right.
it could be a situation where positive things are happening in that room, and that's the reason why it becomes more of a committee approach.
Yeah. I don't know if Zigba had 60% of the running back carries in 18.
Yeah, I'll sell it too. But what's
Amir did.
interesting
Amir
to
in
me,
2014 did, and 2015.
well, what the fascinating thing to me is that the coaching staff seems committed to this idea that they want a guy like that when it seems like their roster is constructed in a different way. So I'll sell too, and maybe injury will play a part of that. You're talking 12-game season, 9 in the Big Ten. It's going to be hard for a guy, anybody, to hold up over that long. So I'll sell it too. Let's go back to the what we saw in practice on Wednesday. So buy or sell the idea that Austin Allen, Travis Vokalek, and then we'll throw in Turner Corcoran being limited, the projected starter at left tackle. Buy or sell the idea that those guys being out or limited will actually be a big deal for this season. And again, we don't know because we'll find out more information on that. Do you think, I guess maybe a better way to phrase it is buy or sell the idea that this is a big deal, something that will linger into the season?
I'm selling it because, first, Corcoran was there. We saw him with our eyes in practice. He just wasn't taking the reps that he would normally take. Although he's had a something of a ditty for much of camp. But as for the tight ends, I'm selling that as well just because of where we are stationed on the calendar right now. Last week, they were in practice. This week, they were not. The practice we saw, there are a number of different variables.
Well, injuries are sequential.
Right, for sure. I get that. But
I'm just messing
I
with
know. But because that's the way we are, that's the place we stand right now, there are too many possibilities that are, someone had a cold that day, or someone had
Sure.
to meet with an academic advisor, or if it could be someone landed on someone's foot the wrong way the day before in practice. So I'm just going to, maybe I'm being optimistic here, I'm just going to sell all that and try not to cause hysteria amongst the big red masses.
I'll sell it. I mean, we don't know enough about the tight ends, and as it relates to Corcoran, I think they have some options at left tackle. It would not be great. Obviously, I think he gives them the best chance because he's a good run blocker, and you don't always get that at a left tackle. I mean, he's a barrel-chested guy who I think moves pretty nicely on that side of the football. A lot of times teams are right-handed. They run behind the Benhart, and whoever they're going to have at right guard over there, probably Sichterman. But I feel like you can, Corcoran's a masher. I think long-term he's a Gatesian interior NFL guy. Guard, center. Probably good at tackle for this team, but I think Corcoran's got the ability to muscle, and body people up. Wouldn't be opposed to and I don't think they'd be opposed if Teddy Prohaska comes on and is super elite early in his career, being able to move Corcoran inside. I don't think that would hurt anybody.
Right.
Prohaska's got the prototypical size. You could envision, I'm talking way down the road here, a Prohaska, Corcoran center to be named, Lutovsky, Benhart line in 2024.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Couldn't you?
Absolutely.
I don't know who the center is. Who's the center? Who's the center, Evan?
Ethan Piper?
Maybe.
Yeah, I'll sell it
Because
too.
Lutovsky can't play center. He's too big. He's like 330. So.
I'll sell it too. I just felt like that was kind of the talking point of camp this week, and it felt like it became more of a big deal than it actually was. Now, of course, again, like you have detailed, if those tight ends are out for any period of time, that changes the conversation. But I feel like this week it was just one of those deals that we didn't see him out there, and it probably wasn't a huge deal. Buy or sell, Nebraska has more than 6 all Big Ten honorees this year.
First, second, and third team?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Man, I feel like I should buy something, but I'm gonna keep my cards. I'm selling this because Big Ten is a talented league, and while Nebraska has a lot of guys back, so does a lot of other teams. Because
6 out of 72.
Mhm.
Well, no. What am I missing here? Not
Th-
6 out of
is
72.
it 11 on each? Do they actually have 11? I don't know if they do.
They do.
Is it
So
11?
it's 22, 22. Why am I saying 72?
So 66.
Well, no, because you get the kicker and the punter.
Okay. So like 70-ish.
72. Because there's a kicker and punter on each one.
Each team? Is there?
Yeah.
Golly. Okay. Then yeah.
So 6 out of 72. Go ahead.
I'm thinking COVID happened to everybody. Everyone got that extra year. So that experience where maybe you could sneak a few of those guys on in a normal year, you don't have that same leg up in this year. And who are, like, if I'm picking 6, if I want 6 from one team, I want some gimmies. So who are the gimmies on this team? Connor Culp?
Sure. Cam
close.
Taylor-Britt.
Cam Taylor-Britt?
Yeah, he's
He's
Okay.
one.
And I would say Dolman is too, but you got to win games. You got to win games.
That's
in
another
order to
thing.
Get him on there.
Yeah, we'll get to that too, but I'm selling that one.
I'm gonna sell it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, it's just hard. Again, you're talking 6 out of 72 spots. There's 14 teams in the league.
Mm-hmm.
You do back of the napkin math. That means that some other team's getting 1, maybe Illinois, whatever. But that's a lot of spots for this particular Nebraska team to take up. But I'll tell you who the 6 I think would be most likely to get it.
Yeah, let's go.
Ready? Connor Culp. He was Big Ten Kicker of the Year.
Right.
Jojo Doman.
Yep.
Cam Taylor-Britt. I'm going to maybe go a little bit off script here with this one. Ty Robinson.
Maybe.
I think coaches are going to, if he's coming along as far as we think, I think he's a really interesting player. And so that's 4. Adrian Martinez, and one of the tight ends.
Okay.
And Cam Jurgens.
See, there you go. So I think you could get it 7 that way.
But they'd all have to get on it.
Sure.
And
Nick
I don't
Henrich
know.
is a guy who everyone seems to think that's somebody
Maybe.
who could jump right in right away.
The
I think,
Northwestern linebackers are gone, so there's 2
right.
guys.
I think one of the safeties conceivably could have that kind of a year.
Maybe. I don't know.
I just feels like there are more outs or more possibilities.
You got to win 8 or
to
9
total
games
that
to get
up.
it, though. It isn't a 6-6 kind of deal. There's no teams don't do it at 6-6.
You either have to win 8 or 9 games or be so outstanding at 6-6 that it's undeniable.
Even then, it's just they don't, because the coaches and the media vote on it, and most media don't know. They just don't. They do the best they can, and then they get to the lines, and they're like, who won games? That's what you do. Like, Illinois had 3 of the best linemen in the Big Ten last year. Maybe 3 of the best 12. I don't know. I'm not kidding you. They were good. But I think only one of them made one of the teams because they're like, well, they suck. I mean, how could they have a good line? Well,
Sure.
if you watch them. But a lot of people can do that.
All right, that segues well into the last one. Buy or sell, Nebraska wins 7 or more games this year.
Bye. You already know. Bye. I don't feel ashamed of saying that, or I don't stop it from happening. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win 7. But if you're asking me to buy, I buy up than down.
Why?
Well, a couple of it's contextual. I don't think that some of the teams are playing are as good as everybody else thinks they are. I don't think Nebraska, you see the name Michigan on a schedule, but that team is not Michigan from 3 years ago. They're not. They're down like 25 pros from 3 years ago. All those pros that played Nebraska, and I mean kicked Nebraska's teeth in.
They did.
They don't play there anymore. So you see that name on a list, and it doesn't do the same. Northwestern does not do the same thing. But I'm the person that consistently says they're not that good, they're not that good, they're not that good. I will only rank them when they prove it, all that, because I think, as you know, I think Northwestern is a commentary on everyone else. They're like Superman, only in reverse. So I look at some of the games that they have on the schedule, and I'm like, I think they're going to win those games. I think the road games set up nice. Illinois and Michigan State, if you're going to play 2 road games, those are 2 good ones to play because you can beat those teams. So I buy. Jimmy.
I'm selling. My money is tucked away, Evan. You need to coax me back in here for a second appointment. I'm selling because the team turns the ball over. And maybe that changes this year. Maybe the receivers are a little bit better around Adrian Martinez. Maybe there's a little bit less wear and tear on him. He can take care of the ball a little bit better. But that's kind of, I gotta see it to believe it. And it's also not the easiest schedule in the world.
It's hard.
It's a pretty tough schedule.
Yep.
Ohio State, Oklahoma, an asteroid would have to hit the earth for those to flip from losses to wins.
I agree.
Then we're talking the meat is this is
then who?
The swing games. We're talking Michigan, we're talking Minnesota, we're talking to get to 8, we're talking Wisconsin. Those 3
Iowa.
And Iowa.
Play Iowa at home. It's
Sure.
on a short week. In theory, it should advantage the home team. It hasn't, but in theory, it should.
I have more questions about the team that
Who
need
wants
to
to
be
spend
answered
Thanksgiving
before I'm willing to bring out my wallet.
You know, you've seen the movie Rounders, right?
Mhm.
Who's he? Who's he in the movie Rounders?
Boy, you're gonna have to tell me.
Joey Knish.
Okay, yeah.
He just keeps folding.
Which is
Hanging
hilarious
around and
because
hanging
this is
around.
He just
This
keeps
is-
folding.
That
You're
is
Mike
not at
McKee.
all. This is not at all how I play blackjack, but this is how I play the
I know
Nebraska.
2 blackjack from the
Nebraska
players
football
in the
season,
middle
yeah.
of here. You guys will have to chat about that. About
We
how
did a
you-
little bit yesterday.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
A couple of high rollers, a couple of Mike
Oh,
McKees here.
oh yeah, for sure. I'm going to.
What are you gonna do with that one?
I'm
You
gonna
hit.
I'm gonna buy.
Okay.
I'll hit. I mean, it's weird because when I think looking at the schedule from a macro view, my instinct was to say 6-6, and certainly Nebraska hasn't earned the benefit of the doubt for all the reasons that Jimmy laid out with turnovers
Right.
and penalties and questionable in-game decisions and development and all this stuff. But as we've gone through kind of our special sections and looked at the individual teams that Nebraska plays, I just keep coming to 7 or 8 wins. And you know, the Illinois is a big one to start. Yeah, they have a coach in Brett Bielema who's been successful in the Big Ten, but they're also a team with a new coach playing their first game that won 2 games last year. You know, Buffalo was a much tougher game.
Who were one of those wins against, by
They
the
were
way?
against
Yeah,
Nebraska.
okay.
There's no doubt. So that makes it a pretty compelling one. You know, Buffalo started over entirely after the spring. They're a shell of what they had been the last few years. Fordham is not a good team. Northwestern has 4 returning starters in this year of everybody's old and everybody's veteran. They're starting over. Michigan State was not a good team last year, and I don't know how much better they're going to be this year. So it's weird because Nebraska has so often, under Frost, been at a disadvantage when it comes to continuity. They've been at a disadvantage when it's come to experience. Suddenly, those things are on their side more often than not. So it feels to
They
me
are.
like when you look at
in
some
those
of
3 games, they are. Yes.
certainly more than it has been. And
They
so
are.
I think that's going to translate into some improvement, certainly from what we've seen. I think 7 or 8's a reasonable kind of range.
I'm going to add buy and sell.
Please do.
Buy and sell that by the beginning of season, Nebraska's football team is 90% vaccinated.
Do we know what's that right now?
I'm asking you.
But I'm saying
If you
we
knew
haven't
it was
heard.
at that right now, you can buy it right here.
Okay.
I'm just curious. Now, here's why I asked this question.
Yeah.
Not because I think Nebraska is some sort of unique, you know, resistant. They have 154 players on their team.
Mm-hmm.
They have more players than anybody in the Big Ten by 20 guys. 20, 21. Rutgers is the second biggest at 133. Rutgers. And then after that, it's like 126. So, I mean, Nebraska, to get to 90, Nebraska has to do more work.
Right.
Nebraska basketball team could get to 90% by vaccinating like 13 people.
Sure.
Nebraska football has to vaccinate what? I don't even know what 90% of 154 is. Many.
Yes.
135?
Roughly.
It's a lot.
So I'm going to sell that
Okay.
based partly on what Scott Frost said
Yeah.
earlier in camp, where he was disappointed or not happy, I suppose, with
Right.
where that number was. You know, it's such a complicated political climate that we're in right now. So to ask that many people to come together on this particular issue as sort of a microcosm of our country, and people in the program have talked about this a lot, how Nebraska brings in people from all over the country, a lot of different views and backgrounds. You know, I think in a culture maybe that's still being established somewhat, the idea that many guys, 140 guys, would all come together behind that just seems a little bit high. So I'll sell it.
I would sell it as well because of what Frost said, but also because what is he going to say to them in the 1 month that will pass between the time he said that, I think the second time he spoke before fall practice, and opening day? Sam, you are Scott Frost. How are you convincing these players to get vaccinated?
They had a presentation the day after Frost talked
Okay.
with UNMC. The doctor that helped them last year to kind of put together their testing protocols came down. I think there was, you know, some progress made there. I think Nebraska would tell you they've made progress, but they're not giving a percentage. I think if I asked you what you got on a test and you got 100%, wouldn't you tell me?
Sure.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say that I got 100%. I got 100%. Like you wouldn't, if you got a 44% on the test, would you tell me? You know what I'm
Or
saying?
you might just say you were disappointed in your score.
Sure.
Like if I said, where'd you go on vacation this year? And you went to Hawaii. I went to Hawaii. Or if you went on vacation, I didn't really go anywhere. I didn't go, like, it's harder to say that. Like, it's just, so my sense is that the number can't possibly be one that you could put out there that people would be like, oh, that's pretty good. Like you could say, well, you know, it's right now we're at 78%, but you got to remember we got 154 players, and at the end of the day, 78% of 154 is actually 95 or whatever. It's 95 players, so we're getting there and we're good. It was like, it's not high enough. So I don't know. It's hard to tell. That's just me reading an answer. That may not be. I may not be right. To be clear, I may be wrong. In fact, I could be wrong.
Well,
I probably am wrong, but I'm selling because they have so many players on the team, and I think they can be hard. You know, basketball, I would anticipate being 100 because it's 14. It's like 14 guys. You can convince 14 people. The social pressure is different, right? When it's 154, it's hard for everybody to
Kind of blend in a little bit. You know?
Yeah, it's like the difference between, you know, a small class and a big one.
Yeah, and you got, not only is it 154 players, it's 154 players divided into linebackers, defensive line, offensive line. Every position group kind of has a built-in clique, so it's harder to get those. It's hard enough to get a group of 10 people to come together on one thing, than to get those, 15 groups of 10 people and say, okay, now we're all going to get on the same page. That's even more challenging.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I would add about the argument that they should make, and that other schools have made, is it's a competitive advantage. This is a lot of conferences. I think the Pac-12 was the latest today to say they're not going to the no contest model that we had during the pandemic last year. It's going to be, if you can't field a team, you forfeit. And so that's, if the Big Ten adopts that policy, we still don't know what they're going to do. It's to your advantage as a football team to have as many guys available as you can, or you're risking being shorthanded, you're risking forfeiting if there's some sort of an outbreak. We've seen how imperfect it can be with NC State at the College World Series when not everybody was vaccinated, and that cost them on the ultimate stage. So I think political views, whatever, science views aside, like if you want to be on the field and give your team the best chance to win, get vaccinated, and that makes things, a lot more, a lot less complicated when it comes to the season.
And that brings us back to kind of where we started this conversation. At the top was depth pieces and which positions does Nebraska feel comfortable with if someone turns an ankle or gets the spiders
out
knocked
for
out of them.
COVID.
Right. Well, if you want to open some trap doors, get a bunch of people at one position group, have them come down with COVID.
That happened
That's
last year.
Exactly. Well, that happened across
Nebraska
the country.
avoided it, but
Yes,
but
happened across the country
Wisconsin,
last
yeah.
year, but especially this year where that's going to be happening less often at other places. I mean, that's a huge problem if that happens this year. So that's to Evan's point. Massive competitive advantage and massive competitive disadvantage, more importantly, if you fail in that regard.
Yeah. Well, the Big Ten has not announced yet whether they're going to have forfeits. The Pac-12, the SEC, and the Big 12 have announced it.
Right.
Well, whether there's a forfeit or not, like, it's a huge problem if it
It
happens.
is, but a forfeit would be worse than a blowout loss. If you don't field a team and you have to forfeit, then
and particularly if that happens and the people in that room know who brought that on, right? Like,
and it's a home game. Imagine if that's a home game for Nebraska. Let's say they're playing an opponent, and the opponent has to forfeit, and all of a sudden you're stuck with, well, that's $20 million we didn't make. That's tough. They're not budgeting this year for missed home games or for canceled home games or for no fans. So I guess we'll see. We'll see how the thing goes with Garth Brooks this weekend. I mean, we're going to see how that goes.
Ticket sales are way down on that. Did you see that today?
Well, yeah. You mean the secondary market?
Yeah. You can buy tickets for under $10.
Yeah. Well, there's 90,000 of them. So, yeah. Now, I'm not disagreeing with you, but to be clear, the whole thing from the very beginning was a sold out. Like, secondary ticket market people bought 40,000 of them to begin with. The presumption, I think, was that they were going, and we don't know what those secondary ticket markets buy the tickets at. We have no idea. Because you could immediately go on StubHub 5 seconds after they went on sale, and you could see that they were on sale there.
Sure. I'm just saying I don't think it's a coincidence that those are dovetailing as COVID cases in Lancaster County is going up, and people are wanting to see. I mean, the recommendation from Nebraska and the local health authorities is to wear a mask.
Yeah.
And so I think there's certainly a connection there to be aware of that's going to spill over into football season for sure.
Wearing a mask in what's the temperature going to be Saturday night? 93?
85, 90, yeah.
Heat blanket. People will do it. I mean, no question. Literally 50 or 60,000 people will do it. But I do think that it's possible that when the season begins, there are fewer people in the stadium than we imagine. And
Of their own volition.
Of their own volition. The Delta variant is up. And here's the thing. They're playing Fordham. If I'm going to, go to a game, A, I'd like for it to not be 91, and B, I would like to see them play north someone else.
Sure.
I'm guessing the Fordham tickets will be around $10.
Could be.
My wife's had a good run where she's just been able to get them for free from somebody outside the stadium.
Wow.
This is part of what inspired like this. They need to change the stadium because it's a propped up thing. Because the last 3 times she's went, she just goes up and asks people, "Do you have tickets? Can you just give them to me?" And they're like, "All right." Like they want.
And they did it?
Oh, man.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because they got like 15 of them, and
I wouldn't even think to do that. That's crazy.
Sure. Because, she's got a couple of street urchin kids sitting next to her, my daughter. And, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, some of it comes down to, do you really want to go through the hassle of arguing with somebody about $5 or no money? And do you really want to do that, or you just kind of want to go into the stadium? I'm talking there's a lot of regular fans out there that are like, they've accumulated these tickets through family purchases, or it's like it's through a trust, or it's through a business, and they're standing out there, and they're like, somebody says, "Hey, whatever money you can make off of these, you can get them." It's 37 minutes before kickoff, and they want to get a runs on. It's like, just take the tickets. I don't even know where they are, that kind of thing. I think there's more of that than there used to be.
It's interesting because we talk about perception of Nebraska is a lot different from what its product on the field has been. I feel like tickets is another good example of that, because I still, in my mind, default to this idea that Nebraska tickets are hard to come by, and you got to get on a waiting list, and you have to make some donations, and once you get them, you got to hang on, or you're not going to get them back. But the reality, certainly over these last few years especially, is that it's not quite that hot ticket, and that can get into the conversation about the sellout streak that we've had before too, about how real that is, how important that is. But it does seem like that's another example at Nebraska where perception and reality tend to differ a little bit more than people realize.
Can you confirm for us that Nebraska will not be wearing little red uniforms? You were out at the event. I think you were the only print reporter there.
Tell us that story.
I saw no evidence of little red uniforms. What I did see was a big social media to-do where Havelock was all blocked off, no cars coming through. Bunch of fans who this was kind of the crux of our issue, was that Nebraska put out on Twitter, hey fans, you want to come out and be a part of this social media marketing thing we're doing, come out to corner of Havelock at 61st. They did that. Sam says, hey, we should be there. I say, okay, I'll go. And I get there, everything's shown. First thing, I get to Mercy City Church, which is where I saw some Nebraska folks milling around. And I asked them, hey, is this where the uniform's getting unveiled? They said, yeah, but no behind-the-scenes access, none of that. Go over to 61st and Havelock. Okay. They didn't say anything to me about no media, nothing like that. Then I got to the actual shooting site, and where they were shooting the commercial / social media, whatever. And there's they're telling telling the fans, don't take pictures, don't take videos, all that stuff. And then a camera guy from ABC comes up and says, well, hey, I'm the media. Does that go for me as well? I'm not even sure I would have asked that question, but that's neither here nor there. He did. And the guy told him, yeah, no, you got to get out of here. Like, media's not even allowed to be here. And so I witnessed this interaction, and I called Sam and was like, what are we doing here? So it was, the weird thing is that you can't block off a street and call something a private event. I personally, if people want to buy me food, beer, whatever, I have pictures of the uniform if you're that interested. But it's going to be, it's cool. It's a cool thing that they're doing to honor the.
So you saw the whole
first
thing.
Responders and all that. I saw everything. Yes.
So I'll ask you a question.
Yeah.
The helmet is cool. Yes.
The helmet is like normal. I think it's like white with a red stripe.
Yeah, but there's more on it.
Maybe I wasn't close enough.
The decal is
decal.
different.
Okay, I didn't see the decal then.
And the uniform.
I was trying to keep my distance to get my secret photos.
Is pretty classy.
Yes, very clean.
It has nothing to do with this.
Very clean. Yeah.
Sort of farmer.
I actually liked that overall spoof thing. I thought that was clever.
I thought it was clever. I don't know that anybody would want to see that uniform. You want to see that?
I saw actually.
I mean, I'm not a huge retro uniform guy anyway.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna do something, I mean, I don't know. I thought it was kind of interesting.
So would you like a corn helmet?
I'd have to see it. I'd have to see a spec.
Looks like a piece of corn.
Yellow. Yeah, maybe.
Yellow kernels.
I'm just saying, if you're gonna get goofy, then get goofy. Like, it feels like they're trying to go kind of halvesies on this, and it's just
Fair.
like some diluted version of what has been a classic Nebraska brand. So if you're gonna go goofy, put it out there. I don't know. I actually didn't mind it.
Do you want to really get the people talking? Trev Alberts said they're not going to wear big little red uniforms this year.
Yeah, that's right. They might do it.
Who
in
knows?
The future.
Who knows? Shrug. Hey,
That
can I ask you
spoof's been
guys
around a
one
while,
thing
yeah.
before we get out that came up while we were talking
Yeah.
about whatever we were talking about before? Tickets. That's what we were talking about before.
Yeah.
So, what does Nebraska have to do this season to get that same buzz back around Memorial Stadium by this same time next year? What will drive ticket prices up? What will put more people? What will bring energy to a Fordham game? What will bring the excitement that this thing is heading in a not just an upward direction, but we're excited. We think we can do some stuff direction.
I mean, win. Just some.
Okay, yeah, but to what extent? Like, it's 8-4. Are people showing out next year if it's 8-4?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think Nebraska fans have shown that if you have the potential to be something special, if you show that you try hard and that you're not going to beat yourself and that you play smart, they're going to show up and support you. We've seen it across all kinds of different sports over the years. Football has been so frustrating for fans for so many reasons, but not the least of which is they're just frustrating to watch beat themselves, and people that come out and support that
Frustrate.
they're frustrated. Like, it's not enjoyable as much as it was when, even if you're competing and doing well and you lose, it just wasn't the same. So I think, you end a streak against Wisconsin or Iowa this year, you finish the season strong, you go to a bowl game. I think if you go to a bowl game, that's going to stir up people enough to move into next year when the schedule is a little easier on paper, that maybe it could be the start of something. So, get to a bowl game, I think, would be a start.
Yeah. You can't, until they renovate it, and they can't really do anything with North, and I don't know that they can raise the money for South. The seats are the size they are. Go and sit one when we get in there. You'll see. They're good for you. They're not good for me. And they're not good for you if someone like me sits next to you. It's just, the whole experience gets bad quick, because you get shoved in there, and then if you sit in that South Stadium, you're walking a long ways up to your seat. You might be walking a long way. You might have to wait quite a while for food, and you might miss part of the game. And it's not like baseball where you have at the CWS you have a concourse and TVs, and you can just turn around and look at the game. Baseball's a little different. Every play in football is super important, and there's only one game a week. So I guess we'll see what happens. I don't know. I think they're years away from renovating, but they really should supercharge that. You've seen some of the end zone projects, where we've gone, and they're just cool.
Yeah, that
Nebraska
seems like
was a little behind. Let's be honest. They in 2013 they chose to build the East Stadium to keep up with Penn State and Michigan and Ohio State. I should say they decided in 2011 and 2012 to do that, right? Probably should have been the time they built a new football building, and they didn't. And now they're building a new football building, and everybody else in the Big Ten's kind of built their building. And now those teams are on their end zone projects. Iowa's building has finished theirs. Wisconsin's building theirs. Indiana's is already done. Like, Nebraska's a little bit behind the curve on the infrastructure. They're going to have one of the best football buildings in college football, but they're not going to have it for another 2 years, and then it's going to take them a little bit more time to raise the money to renovate South.
Yeah,
because that needs to be renovated. Those people up in the middle of nowhere.
It does. Well, the modern stadium experience for football and other sports is to have kind of a pavilion or a walk around is really popular, where you can congregate. You don't have to be in your seat to be able to see the game. And like you said, at Memorial Stadium, as much of a classic venue as it is, if you're not in your seat, you're underneath, you're missing the action. And when that is your competition for staying home in your chair with a bathroom and free drinks and everything in your home, you can watch 5 games at once. It's absolutely true that the experience in the stadium needs to be modernized, and they've fallen behind in that.
The games used to be 2 hours and 20 minutes too. They're 3
You're
hours
sitting
and
through
41
commercials.
minutes.
To that point about the competition against sitting at home in the chair, I would say more and more so the modern stadium experience is Nebraska's on the big TV. We got 4 more TVs over here. There's a lot of good games on today. I don't just like Nebraska. I like college football as a whole.
Right.
So that's a challenge that no matter how good you are, you're going to run into problems.
Yeah, you're committing your whole day.
Yeah. Nick Saban is out here every year complaining about fans not showing up to these 75-0 blowouts. It's like, well, hey, man, there's a good SEC game on at 3:30. So.
And he's and he understands at long last, you can't farm out your best non-conference games to a neutral site venue that only the richest people in your fan base can go to. And so they've been playing their elite game on the first weekend in Dallas and Orlando, and they're finally going back to some home and homes so that somebody who doesn't live in those places can go to the games. And Nebraska has always had, obviously, its best non-conference games here, but simultaneously, it's just they haven't had the best non-conference games. Colorado was cool.
Miami was cool.
UCLA
Oregon.
was 11 frickin' a.m. That was not a good time to play that game. Oklahoma will be great.
Yeah.
That'll be awesome. But they haven't had always the best games, and then they haven't the fan experience. Yeah. I mean, sometimes they show games on the big screens during timeouts.
Sometimes.
And you'll notice this a lot of times at the games. They turn the football game into a recruiting event for every other sport. And so every single person who has ever played at Nebraska comes to the center field and gets a tchotchke, some award that no one's ever heard of. That's not, people have heard of them, but the 37th Joe Wilson Award,
Right.
And instead of showing a football game on the big screen, it's please take your direct your attention to today's special guest.
Mm-hmm.
And those get old.
Agreed.
All right. I think this podcast has gotten to that point.
I think we're ready.
I think we've reached that point. All right. We'll be back next week. Our typical podcast schedules as we roll into the season are going to be on Tuesdays. So we will be recording this podcast on Tuesday afternoons, and it'll go up after that. Starting next week, we'll have a big season preview. We'll do a little bit on the offense, a little bit on the defense, and we'll kind of talk about our predictions for the season. And then after that, we will get into the weekly schedule, and we will have our weekly picks. We'll pick the winners. We'll have 10 each week. Evan is sort of on a 2-year winning streak. I don't even know how last year turned out.
I think we can assume I won, but I don't know
I
for
think
sure.
you did. I think you did. You beat me by 1 the year before because I let you decide whether you wanted Clemson or LSU.
Yeah.
And you took LSU.
Yeah.
I caught you in the bowls.
You tend to do that.
I'm deadly in the bowls.
I tend to pull ahead and then you catch up.
I'm deadly in the bowls. I'm telling you. I'm
So
lethal
you can
in
tell
the bowl
you can
games.
tell who those games matter to then.
He has a strong kick.
Okay.
He's.
But
using
this guy,
runner parlance.
he gets very, very. If he gets a lead early in the season, he knows how to hold on to it. He's Wisconsin. He knows how. If you give him a 10-point lead, he manages to find a way to keep that 10-point lead. What is changing is we're adding you to the mix, and you might be able to knock him off his game.
All right,
We'll see.
You got some extra energy. You never know.
If I
Now
fall-
he's got to battle 2 of us and not just one.
If I fall behind though, then I have to start trying to play catch up, and then it gets ugly. I'm a running team that tries to pass. It's not pretty.
This is true. He's Wisconsin. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Pick Six Podcast. We'll be back next week.